Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of SharePoint TV. We're filming this episode live from Ignite. We have some amazing guests that we're going to introduce really soon. Remember, something that I really want you guys to remember about SharePoint TV in general is that it's an interactive show. It's not a 1 hour webinar where you have to wait until the end before you can actually ask questions. We're here to answer the question that you guys have. Make sure you log in Twitch. Make sure you follow us on the top right of your screen, and you're going to have the chat. Ask the questions that you want for Jeff and Dan. Before we get started with our guest, I'm not going to talk too much at the beginning. Let's just roll a quick video from our producer sponsor, Valo, and then we're going to be right back with Jeff and Dan. Welcome back. As I mentioned before, we're at Microsoft Ignite in Orlando. For those of you who are not following Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and all of the other channels, Microsoft Ignite is the biggest Microsoft conference in the world, I would say. Over 30,000 attendees, plus all of the Microsoft speakers and the community speakers, plus the sponsors. And we're actually really lucky because we have the chance to talk to two of the top people in the SharePoint, OneDrive, Yammer, and Stream team, Jeff Teper and Dan Holme. So, how are you guys doing?
Doing awesome. Thanks for inviting us, Vlad.
Fantastic, Vlad.
Awesome. It's an honor to have you both on the show. Let's get started with a quick question that I had, and this kind of is my personal question. I've spoken at a few conferences, nothing compared to how many or how big you guys have. And I've seen on Twitter, kind of in the days leading to the keynote, a few screenshots of kind of preparing for all of the demos and mentioning that the Word document, there was like a screenshot of the transcript that was, I think, on version over 1,000. Jeff, kind of how do you prepare for such a big keynote? Because I think you work with a bunch of different teams at Microsoft, probably hundreds of people. So how does that process work?
Yeah. Well, it starts actually probably 6 to 12 months before the event, where we have what we call a vision day, where we teach and we build some concept storyboards about what we want to share at the next Ignite or SharePoint conference. And we have sort of a trade show boost from across the team. And we at least take a crack at that point about how we might tell this story. And then we go heads down for a while, delivering things as we go. And then probably about, I'd say, 2 months or so before the event, Dan and team kick in and start to structure the positioning framework for us, how we're going to talk about it, what's going to be the news, how does it relate to other Microsoft stories and narratives. And so I would say probably there's a review with me and a whole bunch of people 6 weeks before the event where we talk about what's going to be the strategy. And this is where Dan this time pitched and said, it's going to be all you for 45 minutes. And I said, what are you guys crazy? You don't want to do any work? And no, we're going to do plenty of work. It's just we're going to do it before the event. And so we talked about the overall structure, this idea that we use this time for using video vignettes, and what was the big news. And one of the things we go back and forth on, what do we combine together in a section? What do we what order do we do things in? Debated back and forth the last few years about where does harnessing knowledge go? Do you set that up after you create the content, or do you lead with it? And this year, what we announced as Project Cortex was such a big piece of news. We decided to lead with it, as opposed to past years where the collaboration work might be bigger news. And so then the team goes off and builds a deck and some early drafts of videos, and we get together, I would say, from 6 weeks to 4 weeks, and then we take a look at that for, gosh, it must have been 3-4 hours, and we all go, that's like too complicated. We got to make that simpler. No, like, Satya going to talk about that? Well, then we got to say something more detailed about that. And so all the time, we have a planner board for all the tasks associated with the keynote. Dan and team are driving a document for the narrative. One of the things I'm super excited about is that we use PowerPoint co-authoring for this, so we don't fork into 52 slide decks that are flying through emails. So you can see one version of the truth. And so every day I could open up PowerPoint and see while you're away in the upper right-hand corner and see, it's things in compliance, or Adam added things on the intranet, and the document versioning, same thing. So PowerPoint, it's sort of a connected collaboration with the document in the script in Word, the deck in videos in PowerPoint, and then the associated tasks on the planner board. And we were humming along, and then 2 weeks before the event, we went through it one last time, and basically got it 95, 98% of the way there in the last few days. We've each made a few tweaks. As you write the blog post, the people, Dan has been the keynote, and how are they going to talk about things? And so they came back and said, well, they're going to talk about it this way, so you got to tweak it a little bit. And so it's recursive. We used our own collaboration.
That's awesome. So maybe a tip for all of the MVP listening: we should not prepare for sessions only 3 days in advance. we should really start this a few weeks in advance to get everything working. But like you mentioned, a lot of work, a lot of the fine-tuning is done in the last kind of days, even hours. Maybe not hours, because that was in the morning, but kind of the last few days before.
Well, I don't know that if everybody should invest quite at the same level we invested. These are mistakes talk. Many people come to the SharePoint conference or Ignite and listen to them. We also know, Vlad, folks like you then go around the world, and thank you so much for doing this, talking at SharePoint Saturdays and SharePoint Tech Fest and European SharePoint Conference and SP TechCon and collab summits and so forth. So we really think it's important that we get this content to be high value, because it's going to be amplified for the next at least 6 months.
At least until
SharePoint
conference.
Yes.
I guess it's kind of the
Big,
next big.
Yes.
At least.
Yes.
You've shown 24 demos, if I remember correctly, during the kind of the SharePoint OneDrive keynote. What are, if you had to pick 3 of the things you're shown, what are like the top 3 that you're most personally excited about?
Yeah, that's hard because there were so many good ones. So I'm going to say 3, and then I'm going to cheat and name others. The first one is Project Cortex. We talked about how that since the very beginning of the group that became SharePoint, we had this vision of knowledge management, and we now have the computing power, AI algorithms, and signals from collaboration to really do that right. And so we showed how you can capture, organize, discover knowledge in the context of your natural work using a variety of AI and ML algorithms. And so that was really great. And we, I think, tried to keep it super simple. What if we used AI to generate an enterprise wiki for you? And of course, you can edit it and control it and secure it with SharePoint. So that was thing 1, which was Cortex. Thing 2 is we showed a lot of Office collaboration all coming together in Office.com and the new Office so we've got access to a lot of tools getting on in OneDrive and SharePoint. It's connected to Teams and Outlook. But people tell us, hey, you've got all this great stuff coming out all the time. How can I get started? And just letting you get started by hitting the plus button in office.com or on your phone is a big thing. People are really excited about the Office mobile app. And then third, probably the fluid framework and how it relates to the SharePoint framework. As I think most people know, a few years ago, we released a new development platform for SharePoint that's grown to be the most popular way to extend Microsoft 365, which is the SharePoint framework. And what we've done is expanded its focus to allow you to customize teams. And we announced this week that you'll be able to create add-ins for Office apps, so Outlook, Web Access, and PowerPoint, and so forth, and then supercharge those experiences with the fluid framework for heterogeneous collaboration across all these tools. And so how we weave together I think was super well received. And then, gosh, I'm going to cheat here. Differential sync, sheet view in Excel, information barriers, I'll stop. But all 24 of them were really good. We would have cut them if they weren't.
Let's talk a bit about Project Cortex. I think something that at least I know you and Dan were really proud of. It actually runs directly on SharePoint, right?
Yeah. So there's, again, first we've got to capture the content, and a lot of that content already exists in SharePoint. But then we've got paper-based content that we use AI to bring into SharePoint. But we're integrating with the rest of the Microsoft graph. So it's not just SharePoint data, it's videos in Stream, it's conversations in Yammer and Teams, it's email conversations as well. We announced graph connectors here for Microsoft Search this week. And so, the big thing you should understand is a big chunk of the most interesting data is in SharePoint. But and then second, we help you create in a more logical way. Things are physically organized, as you know, in sort of Teams channels and SharePoint sites and OneDrive folders and so forth. But the way the web works is you want a logical organization of that. I want the topics for marketing or sales, and that could transcend multiple physical locations. And so we automatically use AI to generate this topic graph that the easiest way I found to describe it is Wikipedia or just content all over the web. We do the same thing in these topic pages. And those pages are SharePoint pages. So you can say, I don't like what you generated, or thank you, you got us 80% of the way there. I'm going to edit it and add my own experts or videos to that page, and you can do that. And then the third layer up, so first there's data, not only pages that are SharePoint pages, and connecting them into the experiences. Hover on a term on a SharePoint page, you'll see that top come in context with these in Word, Excel, PowerPoint documents, in Outlook and Teams. And so I'm excited about the connections to SharePoint, but both the data and where the experiences land is much more broad. And so that's why we gave it a new identity, Project Cortex, to show that it is about transcending all your knowledge and expertise in learning in every experience in Microsoft 365. How did I do, Dan? Was that pretty good? We've been working on the positioning for a while.
You've been nailing that, Jeff. Good work.
Talk about something, how you're going to, it's sort of meta. You talk about how you're going to talk about it for a few months, and eventually you get it down.
You're pro, Jeff. Keep building. Keep leading as well. An amazing set of technologies. I hope everyone out there is able to take advantage of the recording from Microsoft Ignite to see the demo that I did in Jared's keynote, the demo that Jeff did in his keynote, and the sessions that we did yesterday with Chris and Naomi. That's sort of a 45-minute, fairly detailed overview of Project Cortex. And then today and tomorrow, we've got sessions by Sean Squires and CJ Tan, who will go into even more detail. I hope you're able to take advantage of that and learn more about this incredible technology. It's leveraging the graph in really exceptional ways to harness knowledge and deliver it to you in the apps you're using every day.
Awesome, thank you. And we actually have our first question.
Left out of the conversation, and I understand that with all of the standards, sometimes it must be a bit difficult to get. Did my Skype crash?
Yes, it says you stalled.
Yes. Okay.
Got
a love conference.
Vlad,
Yeah, we're all on
Wi-Fi. So
Vlad's Skype stalled. I'll finish the question he was asking, which is what is the plan for bringing Project Cortex to GCC and GCC High?
Yeah, and it is fair that there's sometimes a delay in features to getting to GCC and GCC High. That's because first of all, for those of you don't know, that GCC is the government community cloud. It's a multi-tenant cloud that we host in the U.S. It's just to meet those audit requirements the government has for us. We wish it wasn't quite so much work. It is. We're excited to do it, but we can't always do it at the same time that the service lands. The other thing is because it's certainly a very big set of server farms. It's not as big as, say, some of the other farms that serve a large population, and so sometimes we have to do work so that we can economically host a set of services in that environment. But we're absolutely committed to doing it, and I think it's good feedback that we need to continue to be more transparent on the timeline.
A kind of follow-up question, and this one comes from me, not from the chat, and you might not have the answer to this, but would it kind of be fair to assume a few weeks ago it got announced that Microsoft won the JEDI contract for the Pentagon, which I think they run in the GCC High or somewhere up there, even higher. So would it be safe to assume for the customers running in the GCC tenants that they're going to see a lot more stuff coming more rapidly there because of all of that investment? And again, I know you might not have the answer to that today, but would it be a fair assumption?
Yeah, I don't want to comment specifically on that contract. Obviously, we want to work with all the government customers around the world, and right now, I think the thing in the way is we're working with large enterprises, large governments around the world. That, of course, makes it easier for us to invest at massive scale in different data centers and configurations. And so I think that generally applies to us investing more in GCC High, even though there's may not be a specific connection between the two things.
Awesome. Thank you. And now I have a question here about another feature, and maybe, Dan, we can even do a demo if you have it ready, the modernization of metadata. There was something that even surprised me. I saw it and I was like, yes, finally. The metadata has been there since SharePoint 2010, I believe, was the first version that had it. And kind of information architecture, people loved it. Kind of all of the document management, people love it. But from an admin, from a user management point of view, it hasn't evolved much. And now we've seen that we're going to have, I think, analytics on what are the most used ones. Do you have more information on how's that actually going to work and how, a bit more detail on how that will evolve in the new, I don't want to call it modern, but modern managed metadata?
Yeah, sure, Vlad. We are modernizing the metadata service, which is used by a number of customers to maintain information architectures using sets of terms in what are called term sets in a term store. So for those of you who are not familiar with it, it basically allows you to create a hierarchy of terms that can be used to tag content throughout SharePoint up to date till now. What we announced here at Ignite are a number of great and long anticipated innovations for the managed metadata service. First, we're modernizing the administrative experience. Second, we are scaling the managed metadata service, so you will be able to host 1 million terms per term set, and you can have multiple term sets in a term store. So it's much more scalable. And probably most exciting, particularly for me, is we're turning the managed metadata service into a suite-wide capability, so that instead of it being just used to tag SharePoint content, you will be able to tag all content through Microsoft 365. And so that means over time, some of the other tagging technologies that exist in other experiences will likely be rationalized into the suite-wide metadata service. And then we're also giving you the ability to import and export industry standard taxonomies. There'll be APIs to help keep those in sync. And Jeff, now I'm doing your work. Have I missed something about the MMS?
No, good. You've hit it. And I know the team at Ignite here this week getting feedback, so I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, and how the management, by the way, many of those capabilities will be coming to SharePoint and to Microsoft 365 across the board. Some of the premium capabilities will be part of Project Cortex. Vlad mentioned analytics, which was a good call out as well. One of the things that's useful to know about how metadata and Project Cortex relate to each other is that I like to say they're loosely coupled. You can get great things out of both without using the other, but when they come together, you've got sort of a whole that's much greater than the sum of the parts. So for customers who have invested in metadata or want to invest in metadata and taxonomies, you're going to be able to use that metadata within the context of Cortex to tag content. So for example, you might have a turn store of customers, and you might train Project Cortex to recognize documents associated with specific customers. And rather than it just being extracting that customer name as a column for those documents, now that will actually be a metadata column. Also, content types will be promoted to the managed metadata service and will be managed at the enterprise level through that. And so that's going to allow you to do really interesting things by bringing metadata and Project Cortex together, including much more intelligent, nuanced policies for security and compliance. We announced over the last months labels, which can be associated with metadata and apply security and compliance and retention policies. Now those policies will come through to the documents that Cortex is cracking open and extracting data from. So I think it's a pretty exciting set of capabilities that bring those two together. That said, we also are building Project Cortex so that if a company hasn't invested in the managed metadata service, isn't ready to do a formal information architecture, they're going to be able to get a lot of value out of Cortex because it's going to be extracting effectively metadata from those documents and allowing you to find documents more easily, integrate them into the knowledge network, trigger business processes, and secure and manage content more effectively, whether or not you use an information architecture.
Wow. You should teach a class. Good job.
Thank you both. Now we actually have two questions.
Let's see, we're waiting to hear from our trusty producer on the back end as to whether people are still hearing Vlad. Yeah, Vlad froze. So Vlad, this was a question about migration. So I'll try and interpret the question for the community. The joy of conference Wi-Fi here. We announced about a week ago, I think, was when we made the formal announcement 2 weeks ago that we acquired Overdue, which is a partner in the migration space, enabling us to migrate files more effectively into Microsoft 365. Jeff, I think you know a little bit about that. Do you want to share the news?
Yeah, no, it's and sometimes when in a world where people are getting information via Twitter, it gets oversimplified. So two things. First, we have an existing SharePoint migration tool that is designed to help people to move from on-premises to the cloud, on-premises file servers and on-premises SharePoint. So that, we're continuing to invest in that and integrate that more seamlessly. And we made some announcements about that this week. Second is the area we wanted to have a first-party solution for was migrating data, not from on-premises, but other cloud solutions. We've seen increasingly customers want to move from Google Docs and Dropbox and Box. And over the last couple of years, we've worked with several migration partners on that, all really good solutions. We wanted to make sure we had a first-party solution since we were hearing from customers that was important. And so 2 weeks ago, we announced we acquired Mover, who we've worked with on some of the largest migrations. And then this week, we announced, just like the on-premises tool we have, that we would make Mover available for free. So you can migrate the data from these other clouds to Microsoft 365 at no cost. And of course, if you need help with that, there's partners and service firms that are experts and have done this over and over and can help you with change management, which is, I don't want to oversimplify it, but the main thing that we heard from customers is make it low cost to move to your cloud, and Mover now moving for free.
Quick follow-up question on that. If I remember correctly from the announcements, right now it's free for customers in North America, and I guess that will be rolled out worldwide pretty soon.
Yeah, it'll be free for. Yeah, it'll be. They're hard-working folks, but it's going to take us a little bit to stand up data centers and go through some of the compliance. Each country region has different compliance rules. Again, it's sort of similar to the GCC high question, where we want to be rigorous and make sure that we're honoring the data protection regulations and expectations in each market. And so the Mover team is working super hard, both on in partnership with the SharePoint team that's helping them do that work, standing up data centers in other regions and making sure that we handle the data privacy stuff, all consistent with those laws. And again, the idea will be this is self-service. You'll be able to go to a website and ultimately it will be integrated in the SharePoint admin console and say, I want to move from Box to OneDrive, and hit a button and you're done. And it'll happen in the right geography with the right data governance. So stay tuned. As soon as we have a high confidence date on that, Dan
and Jeff, are you going to take up hockey to play in your new Edmonton office?
Amazing mall in Edmonton. Looking forward to going there. I am not a hockey. I would love to see. As I understand, intelligent intranet part of our team, we have a number of folks who came through a previous acquisition. Some people remember a company called Encompass. So we have a little bit of now a Calgary Flames versus Edmonton Oilers rivalry going on in the team that I learned about this week. And so there'll be some serious Canadian smack talking. And I'll have no idea what they're talking about, but I'm glad people are passionate in the team.
Hey, Jeff, quick hit here. You want to talk about the new file size limit in SharePoint and OneDrive?
Yeah, this is where when Vlad asked about favorite features, I just didn't know where to start. But we now support 100 gig files. This is something that people have asked us for large media files. We have ad agencies that want to ship around or give access to commercials in progress and things like that. Zip files, PSTs. People should move PSTs to Exchange, by the way, and not ideally manage them on their OneDrive. But we know people still do that, and we want to support that. And so we have 100 gigabyte file size support in SharePoint. And then we've also added differential sync. So when a file changes on the device, only the bytes that have changed get patched up to the server. This is something we've had for years in Word, Excel, PowerPoint as part of our co-authoring stack. But it's a little more tricky to do it in what we'd call unenlightened apps that if somebody's just gives us a file. And so we had to do a lot more work to do it robustly. And we've been working on that for quite a while. It's actually the same under the covers technology supporting this delta synchronization as we're doing for the high-speed fluid framework, which is farther out, but coming into preview fairly soon. So to sum up, we have a next generation storage infrastructure in SharePoint built on Azure Storage that supports 100 gig files today, Delta Sync today, and the Fluid framework in the near future.
Awesome. There's a question that Dan actually answered on the chat, but I just want to get it out here for people watching the recording on YouTube or other channels. So the question was, the article, at least the press release, says that it will be free eventually for all Microsoft 365 users. Is it only Microsoft 365 or any Office 365 subscription, Dan?
I expected you to toss that to Jeff. Sorry. It will be free for for Office users. It's going to be part of getting files to SharePoint and OneDrive and Microsoft 365, and obviously creating those files to Teams as well. So it'll be available to all users eventually, and as we've said, just North American users during these initial weeks here.
Awesome, thank you. You answered it on the chat, so like you said all. So I was going to put you on the stand. It was.
Yeah, you just have to have a subscription to move the data too, and that's the only requirement.
Also, a conversation I saw on Twitter recently, somebody asked, and really interesting would move.
It also works from tenant to tenant. And that has been a big thing, at least from what I've seen in a lot of big clients with acquisitions, mergers, things like that, okay, we're both in Office 365. We need to get information from one tenant to the other. And the migration tool was really about getting customers to the cloud, getting them from file shares, SharePoint on-prem. And I think Mover will also fill that kind of, that gap of getting people, all of those multiple tenants into one Microsoft 365 tenant, correct?
Yeah, that's something, that particular scenario is an important one to customers. We're going to look at the details of exactly the best way to do it in the medium to long term carefully now that the Mover team is part of Microsoft, because there are, in order to do it with the highest fidelity, there's some work we want to do, but certainly that the capabilities that are in the Mover service today are still there, and we're not taking them away. I just set expectations. I think to really achieve that scenario completely, there's more work we have to do on the SharePoint side.
Okay, last question for quick topics. So far, now that you guys have an office in Edmonton, Canada, you have one in Oslo, Norway, if I'm not mistaken, for the FAST and the search team. When are you going to buy a company more in the south, like Hawaii, so you don't have to go in?
Do not tell Dan that we do an acquisition in Hawaii. People who know Dan will understand that. But I don't know that there's a lot of tech companies, but I think, Vlad, if we were going to here. Yes.
Now let's talk a bit about another big kind of topic in the keynote that had a few announcements, the intelligent intranet. I saw that you guys are really coming up with multi-hub, multilingual, home sites that were announced at the SharePoint conference are going to hit general availability every tenant pretty soon. How do you see people kind of migrating from classic to modern? Do you see kind of mostly modern now? Is it still people that have both of them? What do you see when you guys look at the ecosystem today?
Yeah, so we do look at this data quite a bit, and you have to look at it by pages, by usage, by organization. So in the interest of simplicity, we'll call it sort of 3/4 of the sites are roughly modern, but then you could talk to a particular customer, and most of their sites could be classic, and they'd say, hey, that doesn't match my view. And so we want to be pretty grounded that a lot of this depends on the organization and so forth. But we're at the point where the majority of our clients are majority modern, and that's in part because we've gotten a lot of feedback on things people have wanted since. But and then just generally, experience in modern is so much better better. The UX is better. It's easier to consume. It's accessible. It's designed to be hosted in a browser as well as in Teams built in. So a lot of organizations have said, hey, I'm waiting for feature X or feature Y, but I'd much rather make that trade-off and take advantage of the 10 other things. The other thing is being the SharePoint framework's just a more modern, if you will, development environment. But there have been some things that have held people back. And probably the biggest one was the one we announced this week, which was multilingual support. That is obviously clearly a must-have requirement for a number of organizations, and we're excited to show that. So I don't want to minimize the set of features that people would still like us to bring to Modern, but we really do think at this point the trade-offs make sense, that just about any site should go to Modern, even if there's a few things we still have to get to. There's just so much more advantages of being on the Modern experience. And maybe I'll let Dan pick up in a second here, but the big thing that, as you sort of outlined, is I would say 10 years ago, SharePoint was a publishing system that you had to do a lot of work to build an intranet on it. And we are pushing as far as we can for it to be an application. That doesn't mean it's not still a platform, but people have told us the whole point of going to the cloud is getting a SaaS solution that meets their needs as fast as humanly possible. And so we are giving you a solution for the top of the intranet called home sites. We're linking that to areas of your intranet called hubs. Those hubs can connect a model where you can mix and match those. And all the stuff that we hear from people, whether it's mega menu at the top or footer at the bottom, or built-in video from Stream or social, and the amazing new Yammer experience we introduced this week, all that's built in. And then we've, of course, want to make sure that people who think they remember what SharePoint is from their experience 5-7 years ago, we've worked really closely. We have amazing designers. I'm so proud of Katie Swanson, Denise Trebona, and the work they've done, and they've worked really closely with Dan on what I'm going to let him talk about.
Awesome. Yeah, it's incredible to me, having worked with SharePoint as long as I have, to see how far we've come in allowing people to create a gorgeous out-of-the-box experience that's high design, that works beautifully across mobile web browsers, and of course mobile apps like the SharePoint app, that integrates across Microsoft 365, and that's just consumer grade simple to create pages and sites with. On top of that, the design team, as Jeff mentioned, has just been doing so much incredible work on creating really, really beautiful experiences. And as long as before I joined Microsoft, I remember constantly coming to events like Ignite and seeing these beautiful demos and thinking, yeah, it must be nice to have all the stock photos in the world to be able to draw from, and these great designers to create these great looking demos, but I just can't create something that good myself. Well, now what our team has done is taken the work that's in Denise's and Katie's heads and basically scaled it and open sourced Denise and Katie in the form of a lookbook. And a lookbook is a term that's used in fashion to show the looks for the next season. And we came out with our first lookbook about a year ago, and now we've got our next version, and you can download it as a PDF, but even more importantly, you can browse through it and experience these sites and then actually install them in your tenant. This is all done at lookbook.microsoft.com. It's a brand new site we announced this week at Ignite. You're looking at it here on the screen, and so you can go through and see examples of sites. For example, a site that allows leaders to connect with employees, that has web parts to showcase vision, news, where leaders can keep people up to date, sort of blog as in effect, integration with Stream to showcase the latest monthly events and other video communications, Yammer feeds where people can engage directly with leaders in a sustained two-way dialogue, events, you name it. We've got this really, really beautiful site, and notice there's this more beautiful button that says add to your tenant. If you're a tenant admin, you can literally push this into your tenant. It's ready to use if you like our sample content about drones and EDU. And if not, you can simply replace the parts that are there and customize it. It's a wide open, normal SharePoint site and page. that you're able to bring into your environment and make completely your own. And we've got dozens of these examples up there, including the new Learning Pathways solution. And Learning Pathways is a site collection that contains dynamic links to our learning content. So you can actually bring into your environment a site that you can use to drive adoption and training. It has the ability to pull content in from our learning resources or on Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, Stream, and Office. And you can then customize it to integrate your own training. You can add a Yammer web part to enable people to do peer-to-peer support. It's a really first-class solution that customers have been asking for a long time. So all of this is at lookbook.microsoft.com. Please check it out. It's an awesome, awesome set of resources. Give us your feedback, and we will do our best to continue to bring these kinds of great, ready-to-use solutions to you. In addition, there's one feature that Jeff didn't mention that to me is a delighter, and is one of my favorite delighters, and that is we are bringing stock photos to you so that you can create beautiful pages of your own without having to worry about whether you're following the right Creative Commons licenses. So we're giving you libraries of, it's thousands, right, Jeff, of photos. Do we say who the source is? Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful stock images that you can now use to create gorgeous, visually compelling experiences on your intranet.
And just a follow-up question, Dan, about adding those examples to your tenant. Do you need any particular permissions, or can anybody just say, hey, I want to show this to my CEO, click on deploy, and it just works, or do you need any particular things to have beforehand?
Yeah, right now you need to be a site, a tenant admin, and you'll see that right underneath the button. It says you need to be a tenant admin. We're working on solutions to reduce the credentials that are needed. So if you're a communicator, for example, and you're not an administrator of your own tenant, you can certainly spin up a demo tenant in Office 365 to be a tenant administrator of your own tenant to deploy these demos to, and then over the course of time, we'll enable site administrators to bring in these solutions as well.
Awesome. And if there are any developers or IT pros on a call, in addition to doing a 30-day trial, you can also look at the Office 365 developer tenants. You can actually get, I believe it's a 90-day tenant. And one of the cool things I love about that is that they actually have buttons of generate data, generate events in Outlook, generate a lot of content, even sample users with pictures and everything. So this way, if you actually want to test content, getting information from the graph, or even making an intranet and not only having, let's say, Vlad all over the place as the single contact resource, and nobody wants to see my picture 10 times on a single screen. It makes it a lot easier to do. It's valid for 90 days. So that can be another great resource to check out. One question, Dan or Jeff, a bit about multilingual. That is supposed to come early next year, if I remember correctly, from the slides. Am I correct?
Yes, I believe early next year is the release for multilingual.
Awesome. And a few of you have asked. I'll share the link for the trial and dev tenants in the chat in just a few seconds. Now let's talk a follow-up question on metadata. You have mentioned that really the goal of the new metadata is to have it integrated across Microsoft 365. Is that CDS, the common data service as well? So you can use it in Power Apps, Dynamics, custom apps, and all of those good things?
It is. It's a separate service. Our goal is to have it integrate with CDS, so that if you define, say, customers in CDS, you can bring them into the managed metadata service. But we wanted to, it won't always be the case that people want their metadata is their semi-structured content. And so we are working with the CDS team so that you can selectively have that imported, just like Dan mentioned, industry taxonomies and other sources. So we're trying to keep it flexible so it can integrate with other things but not require them.
Awesome. One last question from the chat. Associated hubs I think was one of the last thing that was either coming early next year or top of mind. I'm not sure which square was that in yet. How do we explain now to users a bit about the information architecture, especially with communication sites, Office 365 group connected sites, non-group connected team sites, home sites, and hub sites? What is the best practice now? Or is just more options for users to do it exactly as they want?
Yeah, I think the key thing for us to stress is we work in Microsoft 365 with a very diverse set of customers. Some have hundreds of thousands of employees, some have 5. Some have highly centralized organizations, some are highly decentralized. And that decentralization could be by geography, by product, HR. It's a matrix of organizations where the functions and the product lines cut across geographies. Sometimes there's reorgs where things move from one place to the other. So like you see in our collaboration tools and in our admin experiences, we've listened to customers of all sizes and types and structures around the world to design an information architecture tool set that is very, very flexible. The thing I really, really want to stress, though, is you do not have to use everything. It is not our intention, because we're building a product for 1 billion users and organizations of all sizes, that everybody has to use everything. We want you to have the peace of mind that it has the flexibility for your need. So there may be organizations that are small businesses. They're going to create a couple of Microsoft teams. That's all they ever need to worry. They'll put a SharePoint home site on top, associated hubs. It's not necessary to understand it all. Then there are organizations who've come to us and said, we're highly decentralized and we reorganize and reassemble our organization all the time. We've got tens of thousands of employees. We talked about some of these kinds of organizations in our keynote, organizations like Velux, for example, and many others. And so where they've said is, hey, we want the ability for, say, to organize the R&D teams for our consumer product lines, their sites under a common hub. And then we've got the marketing teams. And there are want those sites to know about each other so that people from marketing and sales can work together. And so this is where the devil's in the detail about how you want communication to flow in your organization. And we just announced a couple of days ago a regional workshop tours. It was 15 cities, Dan, or something like that, 14 cities, where we're going to go around the world and have workshops to help companies use information architecture options. There is no product that will ever have the one information architecture that's going to work for Accenture with 400,000 employees down to a 10-person law firm where their structure of collaboration is just very different. And so it's on us to give you things like the lookbook, where you can see the range of options these workshops that we're hosting around the world, to pick the options that make sense for you. Hopefully that clarifies things, that we're not trying to get everyone to use everything in Microsoft 365.
You mentioned something that's really interesting and something that I don't think has been publicized a lot. What is the exact name? Give me 1 second. I have it here. Intelligent Intranet Accelerator Workshops. Those will actually be held before Ignite the tour locations. I'm personally signed up to the one in Toronto. I really want to see how in a way Microsoft presents all of the out of the box in a really kind of 4-hour workshop, something that I don't get a chance to spend the time a lot with Microsoft people and partners often, so I'm signed up for the one in Toronto. They have it in Paris for those of you attending Ignite the Tour Paris just next week, November 12th. I will share the link in the chat. It's not in all of them so far. I'm not sure if it's going to make it, but at least 10 of them looking at the registration list here. So if you want to build a modern intranet on SharePoint, you might be on Classic now, you might be on Prem, or you just want to maybe understand in a real case scenario, in more of a focused workshop, how all of those work together, I really encourage you to attend. They're free, and if you're traveling for Ignite the Tour, it's just one day before, so makes it super easy to have more people to attend.
Yeah, and I think connecting a couple of dots here, we're at a really amazing point in SharePoint's journey. It was just 3.5 years ago that Jeff stood on stage and talked about what was going to be modern SharePoint. There was only a few pieces of code out in the wild at that point that sort of gave a glimpse into it. Here we are 3.5 years later, we're delivering the final major table stakes that are needed for every customer to move their intranets from classic SharePoint in the cloud or from on-premises into SharePoint in Microsoft 365. We're delivering these great workshops, which in my opinion are long overdue, for customers that really want a moment to just stop and think and understand what our strategy is, to learn from other customers about tips and guidance for success, and to meet people in this workshop who are at the same point in their journey, and network and make those connections that will help them move forward. This is a really exciting time for us with the Intelligent Intranet, and please do join us at these Intelligent Intranet Accelerator workshops. As Vlad said, they are in, the day before a handful of our Ignite Tour events. And the Ignite Tour events are also free. We've got 4 sessions related to SharePoint, OneDrive, Yammer, Stream, and Office at the Ignite Tour stops as well. So for those of you who haven't been able to join us here in Orlando, we'll bring the best of Microsoft Ignite to you on the road.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Dan. We're reaching the top of the hour. It seems we've answered almost all of the questions in the chat. There was one last one that we're going to get to, and after that, promise this is the last one. With the Fluid coming in, should we expect a lot more features coming to Office Online, kind of getting closer to that parity with Office Hard Client, or will they always not be seen as separate offerings, but will the kind of Office Hard Client have extra features not available in Online?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a little independent of Fluid. What we are doing is trying to bring the best capabilities we can to all 5 versions, all 5 platforms: Mac, Windows, Web, iOS, and Android. And so, like you'd think of is any modern cloud mobile rich service, take Netflix, for example, or Spotify. What we're doing is putting as much of the logic as we can on the service. So all the rich collaboration capabilities, all the advanced security for IT, all the AI to help people create content better than ever before. And then we're enhancing all the apps on all the platforms to take advantage of that and bring as many capabilities as we can. So we are very much enhancing the web-based applications coming there, whether it's things powered by or just basic functionality. So we've added the ability to create pivot tables in Excel Online. And so our goal is not to signal in any way that we're preferring the web versus the desktop. We're investing heavily in the desktop. We're investing heavily in the web. We're investing heavily in the mobile. So you can choose where you're comfortable working and have the best solution there. Now, the Fluid framework is what that's doing is that will give us collaboration where you can work across the different tools. Today, 2 people can co-auth in Word, but if there's a table in Word that you want to use also in PowerPoint and collaborate across those tools, that's not possible today. And I think what we've done with the Fluid framework, leveraging some technology in SharePoint, is a real breakthrough. But again, that is something we'll bring to all the applications and all the platforms over time. this will be sequenced, and I know we'll get there's the physics involved. Doesn't always make that work. So anyway, we're going to bring great innovation to the rich clients and the web clients, and Fluid is going to be part of that innovation.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeff. Thank you very much, Dan. For everybody watching us live, before we announce next week's guest, let's take a look at a word from Jeff himself, actually, talking about the next big SharePoint event, which is SharePoint Conference 2020.
Hey, Jeff Teper from Microsoft, from the Office, OneDrive, and SharePoint team. The SharePoint conference is really an amazing event where people come from all over the world to learn about our latest innovations, about best practices for applying SharePoint and related Microsoft technologies to their organization, and also just to network and have fun with people they've known for many years or people they're just meeting for the first time at this SharePoint conference. We are very open. It's a two-way dialogue here, and so we'll share the work that we're coming out with, but it's a chance for you to also give input into the future of Microsoft products. The pace of technology, specifically cloud and AI and mobile, are transforming how people work. They're transforming the nature of business. Entire business models and industries are reshaped because of this technology. As people are trying to attract the best talent and motivate that talent, technology is a key part of that. And what we try to do at a SharePoint event is balance that, deliver a solution with not just SharePoint, but all of Microsoft 365 to help you build what we call a modern workplace to engage your employees and help you transform your business. That's why it's critical to come to events like this, is that balance between business and technology and culture to get those three things working in a complementary way. We have a wonderful team who's very dedicated and passionate at Microsoft. And it is just so fun to share what we've been working on. It's about the technology, it's about the people first and foremost. And whether the people are ones that we've known for a long time or new friends.
Now let's talk a bit about next week. Next week we're going to have two awesome MVPs join us, Laura Rogers and Daniel Christian. We're going to talk a lot about Power Automate, Power Apps, how they interact with SharePoint, and of course about all the Microsoft 365 stack. If you have missed part of the show, the recording will be up on YouTube. Make sure you click the purple button at the top right of your screen to follow us. This way you get a notification next time that we go live. And make sure you register for SPC 2020 in May next year. If you really wish you were here in Ignite to see Jeff and Dan announce all of this good stuff live, the next chance you have is in Las Vegas in SPC 2020, and I really hope to see you there. Thank you very much for watching, and until next week.